right, Granny, I want you to, is there anything you want to share?
Okay, I'll just share from the time I can remember, up through the tornado and all of that. It was an interesting part of my life. We lived in Detroit, Michigan, and my dad was a builder, a very good builder, and made very good money. And all of a sudden, they had what they call the Great Depression. There was no building, all buildings stopped, so he had no job. So he had his first car that he was so proud of, but he sold his first car. They went back to Poplar Bluff, Missouri, and was with his mother's house, so they found a place to live. And is it back on?
It's on. Go ahead.
Okay. And then his brother-in-law told him that his mother had died and left a house in the country, and then it was in the Great Depression and nobody was buying it, that if they were interested in buying that house, they could just move out there and stay and not make any payments until the Depression was over and my dad was making money again, which was had to be of the Lord. And so we moved out to the country, and I remember the day we moved. That night was when I had the dream that the bear was chasing me around the tree. I guess it must have been stressful on me too. But my mother loved the place. We had a plum tree, apple tree, peach tree, and grape vineyard, and asparagus bed, and a barn, and a hen house, and an outdoor john. And so we were all set, even though it was a Great Depression. My dad sold his car and bought a horse, wagon, and plow gardening tools, because the place was about 20 acres woodland and 20 acres tillable. So we were never hungry, and we even helped some of the neighbors that were short on food because of him having the plow and the horse and the equipment. And I was 3 years old when we moved there, and then in March 13th, when I was 5, why the next Sunday, 2 weeks later, was Easter. And we had an Easter egg hunt in the yard. That was so much fun. And it was real windy. And we went to bed. The wind was blowing, you could hear it, and the sun had gone down, and the trees were blowing. And my mother went upstairs to shut the upstairs. It was a small house, but it had an upstairs, and went up to shut the window. And all of a sudden, my dad come running and jumped across the crossways or across the bed where all three of us were kids. Regina was 9, and Rabina was 6, and I had just turned 5. And to keep us from, that's the last I remember until my dad, the last he remembered, until when he come to, there was no house. The house had been scattered by a tornado for 2 miles. There was no barn, no hen house, no toilet. There was nothing on the hill, no lumber. And my dad was sitting in the yard, and he had a quilt and me clasped under his arms. And I was unconscious. He thought that he had strangled me because he had my head under his arm. And he got me up, but then he heard my heart was beating. So he knew that, and then they heard Rabina cry, and she was 6. Well, the old-fashioned sofa had blown over the big, huge rose bush, and she was in kind of the cave under the sofa. And so my dad took me in the quilt and wrapped us, put us in there with Rubina, and I told Rubina, said, now, you girls stay right there till I go find your mom and Regina. And about that time, Regina come running up out of the garden from across the road. And so then he had us all three there. And with Regina being 9 years old, he felt comfortable with her taking care of us. He went to find Mom, and the 2-story brick fireplace had tumbled, and one of Mama's legs was under the pile of brick. He had to move all the brick before he could get Mama up. And all the time it was raining and lightning. And then he could see there was a house across the field that had lights on in it. And so he took me on one arm, on one shoulder, Rubina on the other shoulder, and Regina and Mom held to his arm and hopped on one foot because she couldn't walk on that other leg. And Regina held Mom's other arm, and we went across the field to that house. And they had it was through Keith's house. Tom and Mrs. Keith had 3 little boys the same age of us girls. So they took us in, dried us out, put boys' clothes on us. And I didn't like that at all. I wasn't a boy, and then little girls didn't wear overalls, and it was overalls they put on us. And the next morning, we always, if Pop said do something, we did it. We were raised to mind my dad, and so he told me to come out and eat breakfast. And I said, I don't want to eat breakfast. And he gave up on me, and which was unusual. Usually I did exactly what Pop said, but I couldn't understand why I had on boys' clothes and I was a girl. And I remember that very clear. And we stayed there several days till the man on the hill, we called Grandpa Sigler, his wife had died, and he had a 2-bedroom and then a 1-bedroom upstairs. And he told my dad and mother right then, you had no insurance. All you had was nothing. And he told my mom and dad that if they wanted to move in with him, why, he would just have a bedroom and we could have the rest of the house if Mom would do all the cooking.
Oh.
And so we did that, and he was a sweet old man, and everything went well. We stayed there several months till we found a house to rent in town. And Grandpa Sigler would sit on the porch swing with me and tell me stories. And he had planted a pecan tree. And he told me, he said, he always called me baby. He said, baby, no matter how old you are, anytime you ever pass this house, if there's any pecans on the ground under that tree, you just stop and get them. And you tell them Grandpa Sigler said you could have them. But I've never done that, but I've been tempted several times. But that's my memory of the storm, that our stuff was scattered for 2 miles, and people were always telling us about things they found and brought a lot of things to us. And my mama's and dad's old love letters were scattered all over the neighborhood. I never heard my mother and dad complain about it. Anytime they would say, oh, you know, how terrible to lose everything. And they would say, we didn't lose everything, we didn't lose any lives, and that's the important thing. And my dad said, we're just counting our blessings. And that was his favorite song, was Count Your Many Blessings. And that was a good lesson to me, no matter how bad something seems, you know, the Lord's going to see you through it and things are going to get better. And it's been that way for 93 years with me.